To approve the minutes as written.
So moved.
Second? Second. Any changes or ideas there? All those in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. And any abstentions?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Then the first thing we have to do for our orders of business is to welcome Dr. Jay Kenton, our interim president, and Chancellor Rose. And Chancellor Rose will have a moment to introduce. Do you want us to introduce ourselves first, or?
I think that's always really helpful. I know Jay went around the table, but I didn't this time, so that would be great to remind me at least.
Excellent. Charles, will you start?
Yes, I'm Charles Lyons in psychology.
Sarah Ralston, the library.
Paula Schultz, Spanish, retiring.
Doug Bryan, business.
John McKinnon, music.
I'm Helen Moore. I'm actually the University Council rep on the
Or Peak, art.
Teresa Farrell, education. Susan Merle, art.
Richard Croft, computer science.
I'm
Hampton, shared government.
And Deanna Timmerman, faculty and president. And then Carrie, can you start and introduce online, please?
Sure. Carrie Wenger, education. I'm in Ontario.
Very good.
Mary?
Mary Fields, I'm in education and I'm located in Coos Bay.
Okay, and Mike?
Mike Pierce, College of Business.
Thank you. Rebecca? You're muted, honey.
Yeah, microphone.
She's in Germany right now.
No,
She's
Istanbul.
probably Turkey. Oh.
Yes.
How'd she
So,
get that?
well, that's Rebecca. And then what's the last?
Oh, that's Sally Milky.
Oh, that's Sally Milky. Okay. So, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks again for including us in your meeting. I appreciate it very much and glad to be here again. And I think the last time I visited with you, we were just approaching the retrenchment planning. And I said that by the time that I came back, I would be able to make an announcement about an interim president. So I'm very pleased to be doing that while I'm here. And I'll do a longer, more proper introduction for Dr. Kenton at the open forum and then this evening at the reception, but at least wanted to have the opportunity to meet with him and you today to hear from faculty about how all of the work is going on campus. I know that we're working with a draft retrenchment plan. Our team has reviewed it. I will tell you that I'm very supportive of the size of the cut. I think it's important for us to get this work done and move on. To greener and better pastures to a sustainable EOU. So I'm sure we're going to get into discussion about the plan, and I look forward to that, so I don't want to belabor it. But I think that it's just important for me to convey to you that I'm supportive of it. I'm very thrilled to be looking forward to interim leadership, both with Jay and also Sarah in the provost role. And I think we're poised really for a next chapter that's going to be very exciting and moving forward to a sustainable organization. So with that said, and knowing that we'll come back to some of these questions, I just want to tell you a little bit about Jay. And I'm sure many of you have read some of this, maybe even watched or listened to the board meeting when I did a longer introduction of him. But Jay and I have been colleagues off and on over the years. We've both had our time at Portland State. Jay has had a very long career in the Chancellor's office, and before that has held positions at 3 different OUS institutions, the first of which was here. So there's something I think really elegant about that coming home, coming back to his roots, and I'm really pleased because one of the things all of you told me last time I visited with you was how important it was for you to have someone in this position who understands the university, who understands the region, who understands your character. And I think that we certainly have that in Jay. And also I think we talked about the importance of someone who knew his way around the numbers. And I can't think of a better individual for either one of those 2 qualities than Jay Kenton. So I'll give him a more proper and probably more embarrassing introduction in an hour or so, but at least wanted to point out to you, just what a really quality professional steeped in the region, steeped in the financial end of things, and also, by the way, teaches classes for free at Portland State because he loves the core mission of the university. So I can't promise that he'll be doing that here. I think he's going to have his hands full, but the important point is how much he loves the student experience and holds that front and center in all that he does. So more later, but I'll turn it over to Jay in case he'd like to make a few remarks, and then we just want to hear from all of you. Have a conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Melody, and thank you, everybody, for the warm welcome I've been getting via email and other ways. And it's an honor for me and a privilege for me to be the interim president or become the interim president in EOU. And that doesn't mean I'm smarter than anybody else. It doesn't mean that I have all the solutions to all of your problems. But it does mean that I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and work side by side with you to get the sustainability plan done, to move the institution forward. And I like to say to move from problems to opportunities. I think we can do that working together, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you all. In terms of the sustainability plan itself, I wanted to say a couple things. I've been involved in its development. I don't know that I fully understand all of its implications. I'll be very candid about that. I'm assuming I'll learn more about that in the next few weeks or days even. But I'm looking forward to hearing comments. I'm looking forward to hearing different ideas. If you have alternatives, I mean, we'd love to hear that. But I think we do need to reduce the budget right now. And unfortunately, I think the number is roughly $4 million. I mean, if you think about it very simply, Eastern has about a $20 million tuition budget, lost about 10% of that this year, projected to lose about 10% more next year. I mean, that's $4 million right there. 10% of 20 million times 2 is roughly $4 million. And it's really unfortunate that this is happening to this fine institution and to other institutions around the country, frankly, around the state. I don't know of any that I think are doing really well outside of maybe the University of Oregon. And even that, if you really peel the onion back a little bit, you'll find it may not be doing as well as what a lot of people think. But so I think it's a tough time for higher education nationally. I'm right now writing an article for Change Magazine at the request of the editor on higher ed finance, and I'll talk about a lot of those things in the article. But we've been through a really difficult time with the recession. I think that recession pumped up enrollments at a lot of our institutions. I think now the recession is over, or ending, I guess would be a better way to say it. I'm not sure it's over for every county in this region. But I think it's largely over and people are going back to work. I think they have, the recession in many ways called into question the value proposition of higher education. A lot of people have graduated in recent years and not been able to find jobs. And they have a lot of debt, that coincides with their education. And so that creates a challenge for not just Eastern, but I'd say higher education nationally. Couple that with declines of state funding, and I don't think that's going to get any better unless we really get something radically different in our tax structure and in our very way of governing the state and funding its vital public services. But so I think it is what it is, and we're going to have to figure out how best we can position Eastern to compete in that environment. How can we distinguish this institution in a marketplace of many, many providers, more all the time, more online competition through MOOCs and other things? How can we distinguish Eastern Oregon University? The other thing, and I'll tell you, I had a conversation with the governor before he decided to run for office, and my conversation went like this: John, we've got to do something for Eastern Oregon. I have a house in Joseph. I come out and recreate, hunt in your woods, and I know a lot of the cities, the counties, the regions that we serve, and Eastern Oregon is in desperate need of some kind of excitement, some kind of event that will stimulate the state in this region into a better place. I mean, more prosperity, etc. And I've watched it for 30 years. You know, when I was here in 1983, I had a young family, and I was one of a few people that of my age group, and many people they didn't want to send their sons and daughters to college for fear they'd never come home. There were no jobs, and they would never come home. And we've got to change that somehow. We've got to make Eastern Oregon and Eastern Oregon University part of a solution to that bigger kind of issue. And I know that's probably outside of the scope of many of your thinking, but I think about that all the time. How can we change? What's a game changer in Oregon? You know, and when you look at Washington and you go east of the mountains, you see something very different than you see east of the mountains in Oregon. You see large cities, you see major federal research centers, you see a lot more jobs and prosperity than you see in Eastern Oregon. So how can we change that? I know that's a big task, and right now my focus is going to be on Eastern Oregon University. But I think part of the solution to solving the problems at Eastern Oregon University are solving the problems more writ large of Eastern Oregon, generally speaking, and how do we distribute the population and the jobs and the economy more equitably around this state. And I'm excited that this may give me a little bit of a soapbox to preach on for that. I have a lot of contacts at the federal level, at the state level that I will pull on for that. But job one today is going to be focused on Eastern Oregon. How can we get this campus back to a sustainable position? How can we rebuild the hope, the optimism, etc.? And then the final thing I want to say is I got into this business because it gives you the opportunity to change lives. You know, more than anything, higher education allows people to break the mold that society casts for them. And there's no greater inspiration for me as an educator, and hopefully for you as well as faculty at this institution, to do that one person at a time, but to do that by working with students and serving their needs, helping them get to a better place. And I hope working together, I mean, I really look forward to working with you. I want to be open, I want to be transparent. I do have some ideas, but I frankly don't know you well enough yet to subject you to them or to say they're goals yet, because I think for them to be goals, we all have to agree with them or have some level of buy-in anyway. And again, I look forward in the coming weeks, months, etc., to work with you to get that done. And I'm looking forward also to getting to know each of you and to help you personally achieve your goals. You know, the interesting thing about higher education is every one of us, students, faculty, and the administration, probably has a mission. And my job, probably as conductor of the orchestra, is to make music out of those various missions, make sure everybody's on their way to achieving what they're attempting to do with their careers, with their schooling, etc. And I look forward to helping you in that way as well. So thank you. I can't wait to get here, and I'm excited to work with you.
Thank you, Jay. So we have about a half an hour with Jay and Melody, so thoughts or questions or anything anybody wants to do? Y'all aren't usually shy.
He sounds like he's already talked himself hoarse.
He's already talked himself what?
Hoarse. We need to wear out his voice anymore.
Well, I don't think this has ever happened in my visits out here.
Give them time. Somebody somewhere will say something.
So what did the governor say after you said we need to do something about Eastern Oregon?
He agreed with me, actually. I mean, he understands, you know, Oregon pretty well. I'm not sure that he's, in my opinion, followed through on some of the things that we talked about. But, you know, and I think he's trying. And I think he has people that are really earnestly trying. I don't know if a lot of you know this, but Greg Wolf, who's his regional solutions director, owns the Prairie City Hotel. You know, and so he has people that are close to him that are whispering in his ear, you know, to try to do things. You know, his girlfriend is from Bend, and, you know, so they understand that region pretty well. I'm not sure they understand the far eastern part of Oregon, but we will make sure that we're front and center in some of those thoughts and visions into the future, because I think it's really a vital part of the solution for the state.
I don't know who was being pointed to. Is it me?
Oh, sure, John, and then Barb.
Okay. A question in general about the sustainability plan and what Eastern Oregon University is going to be. And I asked Chancellor Rose this, and we had a little bit of the discussion last time she was here, that Eastern Oregon, in general, the area, is full of promise and full of people that haven't gone to school before, and full of lots of people that are right on the edge of being able to support and afford higher education. Yet we're building a sustainability plan as if there will be no subsidy for those folks. As Tip O'Neill said, I'm not providing a handout, I'm providing a hand up. We have lots of people full of promise in Eastern Oregon. This is a general question. Isn't the state going to do something to provide a hand up for those students, or are we just going to be the school that we can afford based on what we have?
I'll start, and Jay can bring it home. I think you know my perspective on this, which is that we have to plan for a future where state investment does not grow. And simultaneously, we need to continue to advocate for the particular contribution that this institution makes. So in no way would I ever suggest that we let up in terms of the advocacy, in terms of describing the very particular contribution that you all make in this part of the state. And I think that's what Jay's former comments reflect on. But we're in a place where your student body has contracted, and we need to respond to that. Otherwise, we won't be sustainable in the future, and we'll have a much bigger problem to solve. So to me, it's a matter of doing both simultaneously, planning for the reality as we know it to be today, and working very, very hard to change that reality into the future. And part of that, and part of the reason I think Jay is the right person for this job at this time, is that there's going to be a national, probably national too, but for our purposes, state conversation about how higher education is funded and basing the funding on outcomes. And what I want to see out of this campus is a very clearly focused argument about the unique value proposition of Eastern Oregon University and the particular outcomes it produces, so that that new budget model reflects the best of what you do. And Jay has worked in these budget models his entire career. So nobody better than Jay to bring forward the case for EOU.
You know, Dave Gilbert used to argue that the RAM model wasn't going to be fair for Eastern. And, you know, he's a person I dearly respected. And it probably wasn't fair, to be candid. And I think 4 different times during my tenure in the Chancellor's Office, we went to the legislature and got more money for not just Eastern, but the other small institutions. Can we keep doing that? I don't know. I mean, I do believe this new budget model premised on outcomes, which will fund degrees probably, which you may find a little controversial. But it'll also fund low income, it will fund rural, and it'll fund probably diverse students, you know, in addition to that, which I think could work for Eastern. You know, the other thing, I don't know how many of you know, Grant County has a scholarship fund called the Wayne and Emmeker Stewart Scholarship Endowment. Emmeker Stewart was a Stanford graduate, and actually invented the iron lung. And his father and he, when they passed, contributed their estate into an endowment. I don't know how many people in Grant County really know about that or take advantage of it. And I wonder if there aren't other little pockets of resources that can be knitted together in a way to make a meaningful gesture to students to help them fund their higher education. I mean, that's a free, full ride, as I understand it, today anyway, based on the demand on the fund. And, you know, there's got to be a way that we can work together to help these people bridge, you know, and be able to afford an education. And I think it's going to take a lot of partnerships. I think it's going to take a lot of collaborations, et cetera, to do that. But I'm hopeful that we can figure that out, and in a hurry, because we do need the students, and they are low income. I mean, when I look at the income demographics of this region, it's abysmal, frankly. I mean, I'm appalled, you know, and many of the counties are losing population. And the demographics are changing. You know, when you get into Umatilla and Malheur County, the numbers, Hispanic numbers go pretty startlingly, you know, upwards of 35 to 45% of the total population. So we've got our job cut out for us to serve those people. But I think there's no better group of people to serve than those. And frankly, you know, Tim Nesbitt, who's the chair of the HEC, I don't know if any of you know Tim, but he's educated at St. Bonaventure and, you know, was a longtime union leader for AFL-CIO and other unions. But he really wants to help the underdog, if you will. I hate to use that kind of vernacular, but he really wants to help the underprivileged people get ahead. And so I think there's ways, you know, for Eastern to partner with the HEC, to try new things, to do different things, partnering with regions, with the other community colleges and other educational providers, as well as these other philanthropic pockets that exist in this region, and to work something out that will really serve the people in a way that, you know, makes it all affordable, makes it all accessible. You've done great work with your distance ed, reaching out to people that are access challenged. I mean, you know, they don't live in La Grande, they can't come to class, but your programs reach them. And we need to do more of that. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity of helping you try to do that.
Since you're both a numbers person, I would like to present some numbers, some figures, very briefly. I have some
Is this a math test?
Pardon? No. And maybe people can distribute. I'll be very brief. Some faculty have been working on statistics that reflect some problems at Eastern, and their sources were the 2012-2013 budget summary and the OUS 2013 fact book. And the first figure you see that illustrates that really Eastern faculty is more cost effective than the faculty at other OUS institutions. We teach more student credit hours per faculty member than faculty at other institutions. And that is probably in part to be explained by the fact that we teach a lot of overload on online courses. Figure 2 also illustrates the same tendency. We teach more students per faculty than other institutions. Figure 3 deals with the operating budget, and in fact shows that Eastern faculty teach more per dollar of operating budget than faculty at other institutions, meaning we are financially very, very efficient. Figure 4 shows that we teach more students, a student FTE per dollar spent on faculty than faculty in other institutions, and even if we include overload. So the picture that emerges here is that the funding for Eastern is lower in some terms than at other institutions, yet we produce a lot, we're very productive. And I'm just, you know, I think this is just a discussion that is starting. So I don't think we're going to have, you know, we want I want a long discussion here, but I think as you need more people institution, there will be a discussion on these figures. Just two more figures I wanted to introduce. In terms of total expenditure, there is the tendency that we will in fact be spending more for administration or for overhead than for academic units, which is, I think, worrisome. Yeah, there's at least a trend there. And the final figure shows that the top 10 salary dynamics, and it shows that the faculty, the top 10 administrative salaries have risen much more than top 10 faculty salaries, which have been stagnant. So these are some figures that I think we'll need to battle with, and that needs some discussion.
Hopefully not battle, but I think discussion. I appreciate the information, and the only thing I can't comment on these statistics right now, but I will tell you on funding, you are funded on the same basis as Southern Oregon, Western Oregon, etc., OSU even. I mean, we fund students right through the RAM model, and so part of the funding, and I don't know what you put into some of these numbers, but you have very few non-resident students, and whereas U of O is almost 50% non-resident students, that creates a tremendous variation. Western even has a pretty large, for its size, contingent of international students that pay full non-resident rates, which roughly 3.5 times the resident tuition. And we're in a situation now where the average funding from the state combined with in-state tuition may not add up to your average cost of instruction at any of our schools. And you're probably closer because you have some of the lower costs of instruction of the 7. So a lot of the math today doesn't work for higher ed, and I think that's why all 7 schools are struggling to a certain degree. But nevertheless, I'm interested in this. I'll follow up with you or whoever, and I'd love to know more.
Barb, can you send that information to Shonda so it can be posted on the Faculty Senate website so that can be shared with the senators? Charles?
So you were here in 1983. You remember the situation at that time was that Eastern had a special arrangement with certain groups. We had a fairly large representation from Micronesia, from Alaska, because we had an out-of-state tuition waiver that we were able to give.
Absolutely.
That served us very well, even though we weren't getting out-of-state money. It's my understanding we were told by OUS to discontinue that process. Now, under the new plan, we'll have our own boards. Those boards, I believe, can set tuition.
Okay.
If that's true, is that something you would be willing to entertain? We could perhaps target particular areas to bring in some, for example, international students to boost the population. I can see a lot of benefits that would come from something like that.
No, I mean, when I was here, Eastern had a branch campus in Truk, Micronesia.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so not only were the students here, but through Dave Rothger and all his good work, we established a campus over there. And I could tell you stories about that, and the boat and picking up the students in the morning from neighboring islands, etc. But I think all of those things need to be looked at. And, I've asked myself, Eastern, Southern, some of the other schools have a non-resident tuition rate 3.5 times their resident rate, but nobody pays it.
No.
And so why not just set it to 2x or 1.5, or at least cover your cost of your average cost of serving a student, and not let that sticker price be an impediment to recruiting those students. Or what we did at Portland State was liberally use fee remissions. If we're going after high achieving students at, say, a 3.5 or above, let's knock $10,000 off that price. If you're 3.5 to 3.75, we'll knock $7,500 or whatever, as a way to yeah, there's a carrot out there, a reduction to come to our campus. So all of those things are fair game. I think we need to look at them, and our structures are arcane.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, I was part of the administration that asked Eastern to quit no longer assessing resident rate style students.
I think it was seen as an unfair advantage.
Right, and I have to tell you, from a state policy perspective, we have limited resources. And, we've got to be fair about this, and we need our resources to go to Oregonians. And I know the competition you have. I worked at University of Idaho. I know how they poach, students from this region. I know Boise State does the same, et cetera, and what's happened in the Treasure Valley. But, I mean, from a public policy perspective, if we already have limited resources, I think we need to target them to people that are paying taxes in the state. And so I just don't think it,
Well, if I could follow up real quickly, and by the way, one of the ways we could create a special area in Eastern Oregon is to create a section of international input. But at the same time, I think many of us feel that we do an excellent job at Eastern, that our students get a fantastic education. One-to-one, they will describe to me that this was the best place they've ever gone. We somehow aren't able to get that information out. We've done a terrible job at recruiting. No one seems to understand what we're doing here. It's probably because we have zero budget for marketing ourselves. And obviously, we're going to remain in the backwash unless people know what we can accomplish.
Well, that's what I was talking about, distinguishing yourself in the higher ed marketplace. I mean, there are a lot of good things going on here. We've got to put a megaphone to them and get it out to the world. And we really need to, work on that. I have to tell you, my first priority is enrollment management, all day, every day. And I will get up with a fire in my stomach and make that happen every day, because it's critically important to the future of this institution.
One of the, I think, nice things about where we are at this point in your planning is that, Article 2 is focused on cuts. So that's where you've been, and you've been in the trenches in this conversation and will continue to be for a while. But the nice thing about coming to closure on the sustainability plan, coming together to commit to implementing it, making it happen, and I know many of you who've been on faculty for a long time have seen this process come right up to the edge over and over and over, and for whatever reason, stepped away from actually implementing. That's not going to happen this time. The plan is going to be implemented. Once we've gotten all the way through the comment phase and encourage everyone to participate in that. I think you've heard very much from Jay and Sarah too, that everyone wants your input. But once that period is closed, it's going to be time to implement. And I think the nice thing about turning the corner on that implementation phase is that you can then begin to have the conversation about the revenue side of the ledger. And that's where clarifying the direction, clarifying the vision, and getting really crisp about who you are and who you serve will allow a more robust conversation about how to use tuition, in what settings, at what level, and how to build a demographic of students that hangs together in a way that is financially sustainable and serves the region. So I'm thrilled that you are on the cusp of getting to turn your attention to that next phase, because I think that there's been a lot of anxiety about that side of it, right? I mean, we can cut all day, but we also need to be thinking about growing revenue and supporting our students. So I think that's about where you are, and I think that's a good turning point.
Yeah, I just, on the tail end of that comment, my discussions with students are, there's a lot of alarm bells ringing, and people asking, what does this mean, teach out, in 1 year? I was shocked when I read the plan. I kind of had assumed, and I plead ignorance, but I thought that when someone came in with an academic catalog, that was good for a certain period of time. So in the sustainability plan, it talked about teaching out some minors and possibly majors within next year's academic year. So could you clarify what are our legal obligations to students that have already declared certain majors and minors, and also just damage control? How do we make this a situation where everyone's not jumping ship because they feel so unstable, which is, I mean, I think faculty and students alike, honestly, people just kind of feeling like they're on really unlevel playing field here and need some security.
Well, I appreciate that question very much, and I would like to address part of it, but I'm also going to ask Sarah to chime in because she knows the plan, she knows the teach-out component in this particular plan better than I do. So I'll turn to her in a moment. But let me say, it is of paramount importance that every faculty member have at their disposal all the information, all the facts necessary to communicate effectively and accurately to your students. We went through the same phase at SOU a couple months ago where faculty were really just coming to terms with the teach-out provisions and their particularities. And it is at this really critical juncture that your students are going to come to you because you are the ones that they see every single day. And if your information is incomplete or worse, it's inaccurate, you're going to have flight that will make this situation far, far worse than it has to be. So I know, having talked to the executive team a little while ago, I know that Tim is doing everything he can to put information together for every stakeholder group on campus. If you don't have what you need, ask for it because you are on the front lines, and we only have most of you in your classrooms, whether they be online or face-to-face, many of you, for another month. So this phase of communication is absolutely critical. And what I would tell you is that the bottom line is that accreditors care far more about students being provided what they were promised than they do about the financial health of the institution. So their job is to protect students through. So with that in mind, we've got teach-out plans that respond to that, protect students, but also we want to be as efficient as possible because we have to right-size the ship in order to make it sustainable. So there's a balance that has to be struck there. And I guess before I turn to Sarah, my absolute request to you is that you get the information you need so that you can reassure students of our commitment to their success all the way through to completion, because you're the ones who they're coming to. And if you can turn this into a positive message of sustainability, planfulness, care for their success, I think it will not only calm the waters, but it will also ensure that your students are returning term after term. So whatever you need in order to fill that knowledge gap, I want to make sure that you all get it. So I don't know if you want to speak to the specifics, Sarah, of the teach-out components?
Yeah, maybe just one talking point that you should share with students if you are in a program that has been identified in the plan. First of all, it's a draft plan. But second of all, of course, you should assure students that our first obligation is to them and that we will see to it that they are taught out in a quality way. So that's really the only talking point that you need to know in terms of reassuring the student. Now, there are a lot of logistics behind that talking point that can't be implemented until publication of the final plan, quite frankly. But when the final plan is published, students in those affected programs will have 1 month to declare that major or minor, and then we'll start having advisors pull from DegreeWorks, what does that student still have to complete in this degree? And it's really based upon that inventory of DegreeWorks of students who have definitively declared that major or minor, that degree plan or teach-out plans will be formulated with program faculty. So that is all managed by the deans, and we will be sending out the logistical steps for how teach-outs will be handled. But first and foremost, the talking point is one of assurance. Yes, if you are in an affected program, the university has the responsibility to make reasonable accommodations to teach each student out. And each student, once you start pulling stuff from DegreeWorks, has an individual pathway to their degree. So there isn't going to be a cookie cutter approach. It really has to be based.
So that year 2014, 2015 isn't necessarily, I mean, what if someone's a sophomore and they've declared?
Exactly.
So they have to be taught out all the way through.
Okay.
Yep. That is our obligation to NWCCU, and I've been in Sarah's shoes and having to affect that change. And you know, it's a balancing act. It is our primary responsibilities to our students. That is the core mission of what we do, and our accreditors hold us accountable for that. And what it means is that we can't save money sooner rather than later. So that, you know, there's a balancing act that has to be struck there, but the reasonable accommodations thing is there to protect the student, not to protect our budget.
So then the word that sounds worrisome in that is reasonable. And reasonable is so one of those words that gets interpreted. Does that mean that a sophomore that's declared a major that's being is one of the ones that's being eliminated will be taught out, or is that unreasonable and you have to be a junior to be taught out?
That student will be taught out.
Right, thank you.
To follow up on that aspect of things, one of the things that I was thinking that's not in the plan, and I understand why it's not in the plan at this point, but as a draft and as an idea. As you can imagine, there are many students in affected areas that have quite, I don't know what the word is, not rabidly, but somewhat rabidly, using social media to spread the word about the cuts, spreading possibilities of not coming back, and so on and so forth, as students are wont. I'm wondering if it might not be useful, because part of this plan is assuming that we're going to have another 10% cut in student enrollment. Right? That's the other $2 million. So $2 million from this year, $2 million for next year. It may be somewhat useful to have an aspect of the plan that addresses that if enrollments don't drop or something like that, that aspects of programs can be revisited, and take that student energy, which right now is focused in a very destructive way. I mean, some of the things that are being posted, because I don't have current students as Facebook friends, I just don't do current students, but I do people who are graduated who have gone on, so I can keep up with them. And what they are posting is negative, very much so. So if there could be a way to take this negative student energy, which you will also face as well with ASEOU is going to be having a forum, I believe, on Thursday, and so on, and get that to shift. So it's like, you know, part of the way to save the institution is to not lose the students, to increase the enrollment. I'm not sure if that might not be a useful path to try to rearrange that energy. But to rearrange that energy, that would have to be concessions to the plan, so that if enrollment, you know, doesn't drop, or if enrollment does this, that puts us in places. Because the programs that are being threatened from going from majors to robust minors, or from just being cut, period, have students who would, I think, in many ways work to save those programs. They've worked to save the programs in the past. Every time we've tried, you know, these plans have come up, you have people who have graduated, students who are in current programs, who work really hard to save their programs. And if you could give them a pathway to save their program by increasing enrollments rather than a pathway to express their angers by running, that might be useful.
I would offer a slightly different pathway to re-energize the students. And, here again, my request of the EOU administration is a $4 million cut. That's my request. That's what I'm expecting from this administration. So what I could say, however, is that I think I've heard now a couple times, I've only been in here 2 hours, but I've already heard several times about the social media and the student participation in perhaps some rumors that are destructive. I mean, they're flat out destructive. And ironically, they actually hurt their own cause, really, because if you're spreading misinformation and you're scaring more people away, you're actually making the situation worse than it might have been otherwise. So I guess what I would say, and I don't know about the student gathering, but it seems to me like this is a place where more information over communication is absolutely necessary, because what people do with the absence of information is that they fill in their fears. So I guess what I would recommend is, again, a redoubling, a tripling, quadrupling of efforts to ask these very students who are spreading misinformation to read the plan.
They have it posted.
To look, that doesn't mean they're reading the plan. To look at the FAQ, to ask their questions, because I think this is a place where maybe more information is needed. And I would also say, and I think I mentioned this to you all before, part of the reason for my pressing on this $4 million cut level is so that as things improve, there are monies for strategic investment. And that has to be planful, it has to be strategic. You don't want to, as I heard someone say recently, you don't want to be throwing spaghetti at the wall with new ideas if there's found money. So you definitely want to revert to the plan for investment, make that plan even more robust if you can, so that there can be strategic investment going forward. I don't know that at this point, frankly, that I would support a concept of encouraging students to save their programs. I think they need to put in their commentary. I think they need to give their alternatives. They need to tell us if we're wrong in the direction we're headed. But I worry about giving false hope to save programs when really that energy could be directed in terms of making the implementation as fact-based as possible, as rational and calm as possible. So I guess I have a slightly different take on how to engage those students in a productive way. And then you all have to do this, so I don't know what you all think.
Yeah, my understanding of the plan, and I'm not sure, I'd have to go back and reread certain aspects of it, but there are multiple times in the plan where it says possibly eliminate or possibly change, and I think those possibles hinge on exactly what you're talking about, where, if the enrollment doesn't fall as far as it, or if other things happen, those decisions will be revisited. And that was my understanding of how it's put together. I'm not sure it's as clear on its face as it needs to be, but that was my understanding. Sarah,
Yeah, that's true. We're visiting with programs right now who are coming forth with ideas within their envelope of resources that indicate that by pruning the program a little bit, they're seeing potential for synergies across the curriculum, which is exactly what needs to happen. The data doesn't lie. I mean, we have too many courses, not enough students, and it's come home to roost. And we actually have to deal with that fact. So the recommendations to programs within available envelopes of resources, we're hoping that the faculty take that to heart and really examine the data that's been provided in the report. That said, there are possibilities, but we can't retreat from the nearly $4 million cut that we have to produce.
Any other comments?
I know you have other agenda items, so I don't want to overstay our welcome, Deanna.
And you have a place to be at 4 o'clock as well, so. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
So the next items on the agenda, the two information items, those are just information that we post every year to let everybody know. So the court contract and the student fees, those are just information items. There's no action to do on those. That's just to let us know about that. Okay, is there questions or thoughts there? Okay. So then the next person on the agenda is Sarah, and Sarah is here to talk about the teaching talk. So.
Yes, there are 2 upcoming opportunities that I'm just going to provide you some information about. There's an upcoming Teaching Talks 2 conference, which is the second OUS-sponsored faculty-driven conference around issues having to do with teaching, learning, and pedagogy. So that's upcoming. The all-call went out through the Academic Futures Task Force. I'd say half the people responded through that body, and then we sent out some targeted invitations, because the aim of this conference is to bring together faculty from across not only the OUS institutions, but the 17 community colleges, and really focus the conversation on written communication and quantitative literacy across the curriculum, but also across the system, so that we can come to some understanding of, what the benchmarks are, certainly as a, aspect of the conversation, but more importantly, what are the faculty seeing in terms of student thresholds or capacities in the freshman year, the sophomore year, what kinds of assignments are possible across the curriculum in math versus in chemistry versus in education, that are actually helping students scaffold their skills in writing and quantitative literacy. So it's really sort of a commencement of that conversation, rather than we're going to arrive at some end point and then it will be distributed to everyone. It's really the beginning of a conversation. We have 10 faculty and 3 administrators who are going from this campus, and I can provide you with that list if you want to distribute it. I can send it to you electronically.
Send it electronically if you don't mind, Shonda,
Sure.
and we can do that.
Okay. Well, maybe just one last word. Donald Wolf is recently coming on board to backfill my position, and he will be the team leader for this particular conference. And because of his expertise in assessment going forward, he will be helping the faculty position themselves very well, I expect, for the university to undergo its comprehensive Year 7 Northwest visit in 2017. So that's part of his charge, and the charge to this group is to begin, planting the seeds for what are some really key assignments in written communication that are happening in English writing, that are happening in psychology, that we are assessing towards, for example, our UWR. Do we actually have evidence that our students are meeting what we think from a discipline-based perspective are the appropriate proficiencies upon graduation in the written communication area? So we need to begin documenting that in a more robust and systematic way. And this conferences like this, allow the faculty to be in the driver's seat as far as the assessment agenda goes. So we have a very good representative from across the curriculum going to this conference that will be coming back and in the fall presenting, some aspect of it during fall orientation. Okay, so there's that. Donald is also going to be leading a team of faculty and administrators to the AAC&U Institute on Integrative Learning for the departments, and that team will be going to Fullerton, California, July 9th through the 13th, and they will be going with 2 specific charges, again, that have come out of the Academic Futures Task Force. The first is general education, to start looking at the general education curriculum as a site for some transformative curricular rethinking around our distributed model of offerings and swinging it more towards those kinds of experiences that would help retain students, number one, but would help us think about clustered learning a little bit more targeted way. So that's one of those charges. The faculty will be coming back with a concept map, hopefully of an integrative general education curriculum that has tie-ins with the first year experience, with information literacy, with the beginnings of understanding of methods of inquiry at the freshman level that will help them move on through and be prepared in ways that are better than they've been prepared for entrance into majors. Okay, so for those who have been here long enough, you might start to recognize the adumbrations of an earlier manifestation of our general education curriculum that was outcomes-based and that had an opportunity for multidisciplinary inquiry. So the general education team, I guess, or sub-team of that particular institute group will be focusing on looking at various models, and I'm sure that they're already looking at models and plan to bring those to the institute, but the institute faculty, and I'll distribute the 4 or 5 copies that I've got here, the institute faculty will be working with our faculty administrator team in specific ways that we have requested. And there is going to be a charge and an expectation that options are brought back for the faculty to consider that will be thoroughly vetted and either adopted or further vetted and put through our curricular process and as part of shared governance. If you have any questions about these particular initiatives, just understand that it's sort of a forward-looking attempt to get ahead of where we know we need to be and start positioning ourselves for becoming the kind of institution that is a 21st century institution with a 21st century curriculum. And I think that these are going to be very interesting, possibly disturbing. I think the word is actually disrupting. That's the weasel word of the year. But hopefully renewing conversations in the fall about moving forward and how we're going to move forward and what it's going to look like. It will be part of the larger arc of strategic planning next year.
Sarah, I have a question.
Sure.
And I think it relates to strategic planning. I hear funding-based outcomes, based on outcomes, and it makes me wonder what counts as an outcome.
That's a good question. Faculty now hold the agenda for quality because nobody else is going to be talking about it and that's why the Teaching Talks Conference is critical. The outcomes that are going to be measured as a basis for funding are going to be the usual outcomes: graduation rates, retention, whatever the increment or percentage increase is per institution, projected in various areas for serving, in our case, rural, serving disadvantaged students, serving targeted populations of students. So those are going to be the markers that are going to get funded, and the targets are going to be set by the OEIB and the HEC.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean the academic student learning outcomes aren't important.
Right, but my question was about funding outcomes specifically, so that's, yeah. Anybody know Tim Nelson or Nesbitt or whatever his name was?
Tim Nesbitt.
Any other questions for Sarah?
I think I just forgot to tell you the second team, part of that team going to that Integrative Learning Institute will be looking at recommendations that came out of the academic task force relative to liberal studies. So they too will be coming back, probably with a more polished articulation of liberal studies moving forward, because we have to submit an ad hoc report to Northwest per a fourth recommendation we received in February. So that team will be writing the ad hoc report, and that ad hoc report will include how are you addressing the paucity of 400 level courses required in that degree. And as a footnote, I would ask you to consider that curriculum-wide. We curriculum-wide have a paucity of 400 level elective type courses for our students that aren't freighted with hidden prerequisites. They will be coming back with a specific recommendation that they will vet with faculty in the fall for clearer faculty oversight of that program. The accreditors want to know how we are going to be assessing that program, and they are going to expect an assessment plan such that we need to begin assessing next year in order to have 3 years worth of data on the quality and rigor of that program by the time our accreditors visit in 2017. So that's a little bit more prescriptive than the general education charge, which is to come back with a concept map. How does it map onto what we've already got? What's different? How are we going to assess going forward? If there's going to be different criteria for vetting what is a general education course, what are those criteria? So those teams are going to be doing a lot of hard work in the space of 5 days, and any assistance you can provide them now, between now and the end of term, by way of, I'd like you to consider this or think about this. Certainly, Rosemary, I got you in my sight line, so please send your thoughts to Rosemary, and I will charge you with bringing input from the faculty with you to the Institute. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Okay. Donna, would you like to join us? Do you want to come up too? Because it will do, the consent agenda will be really quick. You want to start the consent agenda? I don't think.
Okay. Today, EPCC sent to you for the consent agenda some changes to the Bachelor of Music program that was brought to you in a larger package this year. When the package reached the registrar's office, it was noticed that there were a couple of things missing. First of all, the check sheet noted 2 upper division courses that still had UWRs, but in one of the change sheets it said they were dropping the UWRs. We didn't have all the paperwork for it. So what this does is it corrects what they intended to do and provides the paperwork to the registrar to be able to finish the program change.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second? Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And any abstentions? Excellent.
Okay, second, on the action agenda, Rayette Newman is here to talk about the early childhood education program changes that were approved by EPCC at our last meeting. I think that with that, you should explain what it is.
And I think, Rayette, if you can just kind of summarize what's going on, then we would look forward to perhaps a motion that moved all of these at once. But we need to understand what we're going to move first.
Okay, perfect. My name is Rayette Newman. I am faculty in the education department, so thank you for having me here today. I'm here to explain why early childhood is very important and why we have modified the current program and are going to be moving it to, or hoping to move it to the education department. Currently, early childhood education is a national topic that we all hear. It's very often in national speeches. It was again a part of President Obama's speech at the beginning of the year. Early childhood in Oregon specifically has received a Race to the Top grant that requires that community colleges align their curriculum with the higher ed four-year institutions. And currently, as the program sits in place, we are unable to articulate with community colleges because the program is not aligned. The new proposed program is aligned with the National Association for Education of Young Children, which is the #1 academic institution that all programs are modeled around, and currently have approximately 40 students. Currently it's 38. I just talked to one yesterday and one today, so we're hoping up to be before. We have currently 38 students in the program. It continues to grow every year, and we are just excited for this opportunity. Why do we want to move it to ed? Well, currently all the faculty that is teaching within this program is located in the education department. It will be an education program as well. It will be a bachelor or a BA or BS in early childhood education. We will be able to track all of our students, and we will keep all the data for accreditation purposes, because what we would like to do is go for accreditation in the future, which would also increase our enrollment within this program and for the institution as well. The current program is currently 48 credits, or 48 credits within, out of 60, students are required to then take an additional 12 credits for electives to equal 60 credits. The proposed plan is 60 credits altogether. We have recommended some minors, however, students would be able to request a minor that they would choose to be able to do. The new plan fits within the sustainability plan. It actually decreases the current FTE that the program is using, so it's actually going to be more beneficial for EOU as well.
Thank you.
Madam President, may I add something?
Sure.
This program is proposed for implementation in fall of 2015. It will need to go through a state process for approval before it begins being taught.
Is it offered online? I'm sorry.
Yes, the entire program is online, and it will continue that way as well.
Any other questions? Can I entertain a motion to move all of the changes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the early childhood education program changes, including their course descriptions. All those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Excellent. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. That is the end of the EPCC items, and
the fastest
so,
EPC thing we've done in quite a while.
well, it was articulated nicely.
Nicely articulated.
Yes. So, are you, John, going to be doing the FDFC proposals? We're a few minutes early.
I can. I expected Lori to do it, but I'm prepared to do it if we want to start early.
Oh,
I had
do you want
expected her
to?
to participate.
Okay. I hadn't heard that she wasn't.
Yeah, she never contacted me.
So we can move forward to one of the other topics in the discussion items and wait unless you want to take. If you want to go ahead and propose this, then we can go ahead and.
Teresa, have you invited her?
Oh, she did not tell me that she needed to be invited, so
I see.
I did not. And I don't know, Mike, is she in her office?
She's not in her office, but she is ready for an invitation and ready to join. I just gave her the heads up.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
We are a little early. People aren't quite used to that. It's always nice to be a little early. Then there's this time.
Lori says she did not get the invite yet. If you could resend that.
I just sent it.
Roger.
One of them engraved piece of paper. You don't have to put my snotty comments in there. Learn to talk to Charles now.
Because I don't read my minutes until I report. Okay.
There she is.
Hey, Lori.
She moved fast like the bunny.
Yes. Can you hear us, Lori?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well
Excellent.
done. We got a little bit ahead of schedule. I apologize for that.
No problem. I was watching it on the streaming.
Okay, excellent. If you would like to go ahead and tell us about the proposals, please.
Sure. So I'm assuming that they're in front of people. So you have a shorter version in front of you. The first thing that you see at the top is the current wording on the website. And then the committee has offered two versions, two options, based on feedback from faculty. And it seemed that we got quite a bit of response on both sides of one issue, so that's why we are offering. Yes?
Doing fine.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
Oh,
I was sharing
sorry.
with.
Thought I heard some background information. So the first proposal was for the funding to be allocated based on an annual limit each year, and that'll depend on the amount that the Faculty Senate sets, depending on how much money we get. And since my understanding is that hasn't been set yet, that we don't have a contract yet, but we can talk about that. And the first one would be based on international and national conferences receiving primary priority. And I'm guessing that for the most part you will see that that will use up all of the awards. Option 2 is the same, except that the difference is that people can choose whether or not they want to also go to a state regional conference. So it won't really matter as long as it's state, regional, national, or international. It would meet the funding criteria, and then it would be a first come, first served basis.
Okay. Does anybody have questions for Lori? Yeah.
Lori, I was looking this over. I noticed that you've added the statement, because of limited funds, FDFC may restrict awards to one presenter when joint presentations are made?
Correct. That wording was already in there, but because we had a lot of funds, it wasn't something that had become an issue. So, but going forward, the committee felt that this was an appropriate option in order to allow maximum number of presentations and scholarship pursuits.
Well, that's actually why I'm asking that question. Is the committee's function to promote faculty development, or is it to promote the number of papers that are delivered? Because it seems to me joint presenters could both benefit in terms of their personal and professional development by going. So I'm wondering if you're trying to restrict the number of people in order to increase the number of papers?
I don't think that was really the intent. What we did was we went back and looked at previous discussions and previous faculty senates, and what it appeared that the intent of the original statement, which is on the web, was in fact to limit the amount that was given per travel request, regardless of the number of people. So that's why we went with that. But again, this is something that's completely up for discussion and for this group to decide on. So we're not really trying to make policy. We're trying to offer what appears to be the intent historically, as well as what we're hearing from current faculty. And then, of course, you represent the faculty body, so this is why we're here today.
Right. No, that's why I'm bringing up the issue. It seems as though faculty's professional development would be the primary purpose of the committee's existence.
And a comment on that. I think Charles is hitting on one of the issues that we saw in the language that we had in our policies. And the question for the Senate to discuss is just what you brought up. Is it our purpose to fund, and I'm going to use this as an example, multiple people co-presenting going to the same conference, or are we funding as many people as possible presenting different papers going to different conferences? So, and that wasn't clear to FDFC in our discussion, and we would like some clarification on our charge going forward with that. And we put this language in because it seemed to most closely match what we saw in the history and the literature that was in place.
It seems like either way, it's the same number of people.
It seems like
the same number of faculty are being developed.
Whether they all go to 1 or whether they go to 10.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, if you've only written one paper, if you've co-written one paper, and one person can go, then one person's not going to go unless they have developed something else to present.
But in the sense that both members make professional connections, attend the conference, benefit from what's presented there, I'm not sure why setting them separately is of any more value than setting them together.
Well,
in fact, they could share
the award. Let them share the award.
Well, that's another possibility. But again, it depends. Is our goal to give out the largest number of awards, or is it to send the greatest number of faculty?
Well, that may be true, but that may be not exactly a false choice, but not the sort of choice what we're looking at. What we're looking at is if we have one paper co-written, it can be presented by one of the authors. So do we want to fund, are we funding, in essence, per per piece of original scholarship, or are we funding per person per individual scholarship? So if we have 3 co-authors in education department, do we all get full freight to go present the paper, or do we want to spread that out to different pieces of scholarship throughout the university? Which is a question that was unclear to us.
Well, at the same time, we seem to still be encouraging people to go even though they're just attending the meeting. And so we're clearly not funding only presentations. We're funding the person's professional experiences. And I'm just wondering if that's what this is intended.
Well, what you just said doesn't match the priorities of FDFC. We don't.
Well, but, I mean, we've talked about different ideas about that.
And they won't get funded, Charles.
They may not, but they're still listed as something that we do want to encourage if we could, right?
If we could.
If we could. Good. Is there other comments from other senators about the idea of multiple papers or multiple authors, single paper? Real idea. If I'm remembering correctly, and I don't know if I'm going to remember it correctly, but for the contract these are just travel funds. These aren't professional development funds. So they're actually considered separately. So the function for the travel funds is literally to travel, to go to something. And within the contract, it doesn't actually limit, I don't believe, the travel funds to just professional aspects of things. This is just part of how we're articulating it within how we're dispersed. The contract charges the committee, FDFC, to distribute the funds. That's what it charges it to do. It's not distributing the funds for professional development. Does that make sense, Charles?
That does make sense, yes, although we obviously are attempting to encourage that.
Yes, that is what we do.
Right, and we encourage that as a lower priority item that we haven't got to for several years.
Well, we debated the possibility of a simplified process by which every faculty member would receive a certain amount of money to use in any way they like for faculty development, including attending a conference. I believe this is one of your ideas.
Yeah, but we have to get that through through bargaining.
But again, it seems to me that comes to the same goal.
Barb?
I think co-authoring is very normal in the sciences. And I think it does not necessarily mean that you put in less work than when you write a paper by yourself. And I also think that, if 2 people go and present, they both have a different, probably, expertise contributing. So I think it makes sense that both people go and both people would be supported.
But then it would be their one travel support thing per person, right? Because we still have that idea. What?
How often does this happen? Does the 2 people want to go to one to co-present?
So what I'd like to, if I could, I'd like to read the language. This is in the proposed awards and funding limits changes version, which I think you were referring to, Charles. And the third button I'm reading from the final copy. We propose, often scholarship activities are collaborative efforts between faculty or between faculty and students. Because of limited funds, FDFC will restrict awards to the cost of 1 presenter's travel costs when joint presentations are made. Faculty are encouraged to share the travel award. That's what we're proposing here, and that's, I believe, what Charles has asked us to consider or talk about, but that's our proposal on the table.
Other thoughts or comments?
In answer to I heard a question, how often does this happen? I would say it is not uncommon. So, and sometimes there will be 3 or 4 presenters going at the same time. Sometimes just 2.
And Nancy has added something as well.
So Nancy, Most recent conference presentation involved faculty from several disciplines. Interdisciplinary quality of the dialogue was important to us professionally and also to the audience at the conference. Thank you, Nancy. Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is that when we bring this up for vote in June, we might want to look at amending that language or not, or...
Well, I'm not really proposing anything. As I read that, I wondered, we have 60 or so faculty that we fund. I'm not sure what the difference would be if we had 60 co-authors all go to a single conference.
It'd be a lot of fun.
And they all got professional experiences, as opposed to sending one person to each of 60 conferences, except that EOU's name would be more broadly broadcast. And so part of it is the intent of the committee, what it wants to get out of this money.
Well, the committee wants to do the intent of the Senate, so the Senate needs to make up its mind.
Maybe we could have something in there that just says at the discretion of the committee, this is a consideration, because I think Nancy's right. There might be some papers where it makes a lot of sense and people are coming at it from completely different disciplines, and there's other angles where the co-authors have a lot more, they come from the same discipline and maybe even are using the same research or knowledge base, and one person can do it effectively. I don't know how competitive it is that year.
I don't like that.
Okay.
I think it's an interesting idea, but it's making subjective calls on lots of different types of research from the university without any clear criteria to do that. Specifically on this, I'd like the faculty senate's position on this so that we know what to do with co-presenters and how to fund that. If it's us decide whether Donna's co-presentation is worth more than yours, we don't have a way of doing science and psychology and trying to decide which is which. So it's a nice idea,
If you
but
want
it
a
would be
decision
difficult.
then, my opinion is that it should be that there should be a preference for the number of people that go to presenting original scholarship in different areas, and not necessarily one person or multiple people presenting one paper. If that's a necessity, then they should share the stipend. I like how it's written.
That's how we intended it to be heard.
So then the question then would be is that if anybody wants the language to be changed, we'd want to hear a motion for that changed language, then a second, then we'd vote on it. If I don't get a motion for it, or if I get a motion that isn't second, then we'll leave the language as it's stated. Okay? So I'll give you seconds.
And Madam President, in
Yes.
terms of the approval, we expected, this is our fourth meeting through on this, I think, and we expected the Senate to have some action on this.
Well, we'll move it in June because this is the first time we've seen the actual rewritten language. And so, but it will, I'll wait for 2 seconds for a motion. Having not heard one, then this language is the language on which we will vote in June.
Okay.
Okay? So, any other questions before we end this item?
Do we intend to include the maximum award or modify that value before our vote in June?
So the contract actually says the maximum award is $2,000.
And we can't revise the contract.
So, of course, the contract may or may not change.
And
But
we would like that to be set for FDFC every year. Right now, we all know that $2,000 gets us to not funding a large minority of applications. And we have proposed less than that. I proposed a model for doing that earlier that we dropped out. What we need is the faculty senate to make a decision on the amount of money. So in your decision, deciding on how much that will be a decision on whether we can essentially fund everybody, maybe not completely, but a substantial amount, or fund a number of people completely and not fund some at all. So we're hoping that you'll accept the language the way it's stated, and then under a separate motion, make a decision on the amount that we fund per person.
Okay.
So they should set the amount at $4 million.
Yeah.
And then we'll cut it.
And hopefully by then we'd have some
And
more
then
idea
we
about
won't
the
have any
contract.
problems anymore. We would have cut.
Okay, thank you very much, Lori.
Thank you.
Don't go away, Lori.
Okay.
One other thing for discussion, what we brought forward was option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is status quo, where we're funding international and national, leaving regional out of the very first priority, which we had a lot of discussion about. Option 2 is the same correction, putting regional in the mix. So what we're asking Faculty Senate to decide when they vote on it is to pick one of the options and go forward with, because the language is identical in the two options except moving regional up to the top priority. So you'll have to decide that also.
So the motion that is made will indicate which option on which we are voting, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else there? Okay, so the last two things on the agenda that I need to do for discussion items. So we need to figure out as Senate how we're going to deal with feedback about the sustainability plan. I would like to suggest, and see what Senate seems to think about this, but I'd like to suggest that we form an ad hoc committee that will write the actual document that will be the response to the sustainability plan. I would like to have Senate consider making a motion to use May 20th, which is our third Tuesday date for meeting from 3 to 5, to meet to get that input, whether that meeting might want to be an ad hoc committee meeting and not all of us. That's kind of up to what everybody wants to do about that. I would think that if we could identify individuals who'd be willing to serve on said ad hoc committee, that we could then email our feedback. They can bring and pull that feedback too. If we get a document crafted by May 20th, we should be able to send it out to all senators for feedback and then work from there. So that was my thoughts, but I don't know, there might be some better thoughts on how to deal with it. But I think we do need to write a response to this one. We have not, as far as I know in our past, actually written responses to a sustainability plan. So I don't really have a process to fall back upon. So, thoughts and comments?
I mean, my thought is that each department is directly responding to the provost and to Sarah in writing and discussion, I believe. So I'm curious, will this document that you're talking about be philosophical in nature or specific? It'll have specifics from each response from every department? Or?
It wouldn't be responses from departments. It would be a Senate response to the plan. In that light, I think it should be more global, because we're representing, as Faculty Senate, we're representing our faculty. We're not just representing our departments and our programs. So I do believe it would have more of a global aspect. When the sustainability plan, the draft plan, has the 5 major, components that they used in terms of looking at programs, and those might be our starting area. Do we agree on those components? Do we agree on the focus of those components? One thing that worries me as a senator, not so much as a department person, but as a senator, is the proposed change in liberal studies. Eliminating a capstone is, to me, a change in a program. That needs to originate from program faculty, or at least whoever is running said program, and needs to do the process through EPCC and Faculty Senate. Whether or not I agree whether we should have capstones is another thing, but the process needs to go through, to me, the curricular process. It doesn't make sense to me that administration can determine whether or not a certain class is offered within a degree. So that's a concern that I have, that I believe is a Senate level concern. Does that make sense, John? The sort of ideas, and I think that, you know, we could, if we could address those types of concerns, send them to an ad hoc committee, maybe 3-4 people. I don't know how many people might want to be interested in doing that could collect the comments, identify the core themes, draft some language, have the May 20th be a work session for those individuals that could involve other faculty senators if they wish to come during that time period, and then draft that out, send it out. That's what I'm thinking. John?
So I think what we have to think carefully about is how the faculty senate charge is different than the other constituencies and the other parts of the university that are doing a similar critique. And think about sort of what John was saying, what our value added is in those comments. Because if we're reproducing the work that's being done in departments or by the negotiating team or by other things, it doesn't seem like a useful endeavor. So I would want to think carefully about who we are as a faculty senate and what type of comments are appropriate and necessary for us to make.
And there will be overlap. I mean, there can't not be overlap in terms of, we're all responding. There should be, I would think, some things that are repeatedly noted by different constituencies, by faculty senate, by individual departments, so on and so forth. So there will be overlap. There's no way that we can create an entirely novel document. But it does need to reflect Senate. It needs to be the Senate level aspect. It's not specific program issues. And what I mean by that is not talking about specific programs, but it's not from that perspective.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
So how are we talking about collecting this information? Are we going to get copies of every program's response? Or are we going to...
No. What I'm thinking is that, I mean, perhaps I'm not, or maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I think that I can read the plan with a Senate hat, and I can read the plan with a union hat, and I can read the plan as a psychology individual, and I can... Hat. All of those hats. And I can, under those different hats, feel or articulate different issues that I might see with the plan. And does that make sense to everybody? And so I see that as wearing my Senate hat, whoever is willing to work on an ad hoc committee, I could send emails about, this is a thought that I think that needs to be included in the Senate one. And if we all send ideas to that committee in a period of time before the 20th, they could use that time period then on the 20th to craft a document, somewhat like how Susan and yourself and I were able to craft that general letter. And then once you had a general document, we could send it out to all senators, because this has to represent Senate, and we have to agree on that. And so,
when is the final plan published? Do we know?
The last day for feedback is May 28th, and then the plan itself will be out early in June. I believe it's June 4th, but I'm doing that off the top of my head. June 6th.
So our response would not be to the final draft of the plan, but to the prior draft.
Oh, there is, the response that we needs to go before May 28th, so that any feedback that can be reflected in the final plan, if it is chosen to reflect that kind of information. So.
I think it will be hard for all of us to know what hat we're sitting under, but I think it's worth the effort.
It's doable. I think we do have to respond. We just do.
I think we have to respond, noting the different hats we wear. Yes.
Okay. So, are there other ideas, or is this feasible?
I think you suggested a timeline. I think we need to think about a timeline, because we want to have our response together by that May 20th date.
Any type of feedback that you have for the individuals who are willing to serve on an ad hoc needs to be there before May 20th. And then May 20th, we have this room reserved from 3 to 5 already. It's the additional day that we have and retain for Faculty Senate. I could call a special meeting for all of us or it could just be a work session. It seems to me it might be useful as a work session that those individuals that can attend can show up. Those individuals who can't attend might be able to send an email with the information beforehand, and then we can work on the document. In
Just
that
a
sense.
point of order there. If we're going to approve a response, don't we need to have a quorum to do that?
We wouldn't approve the response on May 20th because it'd be just drafted. So what we would need to do then is, and I would assume we could send out the final document that we agree upon, and then we can vote on that electronically.
Okay, and timeline again, because we need to
Before
have,
May 28th. So if the document can be created on the May 20th, I can get it sent out May 20th. May 20th is a Tuesday, so by the 25th, you should have time to read it. We can have email conversations about it, finalize the document by the Monday.
That's Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Hey, it's just a holiday. Y'all aren't taking it off, are you? So then the Tuesday, that's not the 28th yet.
28th is a
that's
Wednesday.
the
I
25th.
think, right?
So we could have it. We could get it approved by that. So I can get it in
and you're
before.
contemplating an electronic vote.
I am.
Okay. So it will be up and down. It will not be a discussion and vote then.
Can we do that?
I can put. Yeah, I can do that. We can do that. We can put it on the Blackboard area so we can have conversation beforehand. So that's where I'll post the draft. We can have email conversation.
Okay, and I'm sorry for going on about this, but what we do in Senate is we often have discussions about different parts, just as Charles brought up the part, and we had a discussion on whether we were going to have a motion or a friendly amendment to change something. It seems like that process would be difficult to do electronically in a day. I don't know how we would vote to accept a friendly amendment, blah, 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 that stuff.
I think it could be doable.
Well, I'm willing to defer
Yeah.
to your judgment if it's doable.
I mean, we have the Blackboard option. We can have the document as drafted posted. I mean, if I have that posted up by the evening of the 20th or the 21st, then you have time to share conversation. If something needs to be changed, somebody could make a motion.
And that fits within our bylaws for making decisions as a Senate?
We have had things that we have done online. Our bylaws, I do not think, forbid us from doing that. So I'll check on that.
Okay.
But we should be able to do it. We follow Robert's rules unless there's something that specifically goes against it in our bylaws.
So we'll have until the 20th to submit our individual concerns. Some ad hoc committee on the 20th will bring those together into a draft of a response. And then that will be approved up or down by Senate electronic.
That's what I'm thinking. I'll get it back out so we can have conversation on that. Unless there's a better way to have a conversation about it. Part of the issue is, within the time period, we have 22 days, 3 weeks to respond. And how do you get that done? Theoretically, we could have an ad hoc individual or team write it up before the 20th, call a special Senate meeting on the 20th. So that's the other aspect of it.
Debate and then approve.
Yeah. So the question is whether or not we feel like we can get feedback to an ad hoc committee, and then the ad hoc committee can get the paper or the response written in time for the 20th.
Well, I'm presuming there's a relatively...
2 weeks, I know.
I'm presuming there's a relatively finite number of points that would be uniquely under the Senate hat, because we don't want to restate all the other points of departments. If we actually knew what those were before the 20th, I think we could get together on the 20th and hammer out papers.
So do we think that we
maybe that's the way to do it, because maybe if we can just get our hands around this small, finite 5-7 points that we feel like we need to make, perhaps one is a liberal studies capstone, for example, that we're concerned that won't be made otherwise, then we could come together in a formal meeting on the 20th, and maybe that would be a more effective way of drafting
Okay.
paper.
Do we think we can get comments back by the 14th, 2 weeks, or 1 week, to an ad hoc, and then have an ad hoc create the document by, say, the Friday, whatever that is? My math is not going to work on me very. Oh, my birthday. So you have to have the document created by my birthday, and then we can share it out, have a meeting on the 20th? Does that sound like a more feasible and...
Maybe.
Y'all
Maybe.
need to work with me here.
Deanna.
Yes, dear.
So, one of the alternatives we could have is leave the ad hoc the way it is. Have the meeting on the 20th, and then call a single-purpose Senate meeting on the 27th to vote on the ad hoc issue. After the ad hoc committee has a time to go over that and present it and send it out to the faculty for consideration. I don't know whether that's better. I was thinking about that before you got to thinking of moving it up.
So I'm thinking about where we already have our time scheduled. So, you know, we already have this room for the 20th. That is already set up. That'd probably be easier. So, what are you thinking? Got it there.
Oh, no, I'm just laughing. I won't be able to make it. No, I'm fine.
Oh.
I'm thinking probably 2 meetings would be, well, the 2 dates instead of 3, probably.
I like your idea of the 20th.
For a meeting.
For an ad hoc meeting, they develop the document. You send it electronically to all the senators, and they vote up or down on it.
And that's what Charles had proposed, to vote up or down on what the...
So not having a meeting of the whole on the 20th?
Just the ad hoc committee on the 20th.
Okay.
Taking all our feedback, putting it together.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
So what I need now is a motion for something, and then a second, and then an up-down vote on that motion, and we'll go from there. Well, I'll get a committee after I make a motion so that we can do this.
I move that an ad hoc committee be created to meet on the 20th, 3 to 5, and use information from all senators prior to that, and then send out their document to all senators. Is that too many words for a motion?
I'm liking it so far. You're doing good.
To be voted up or down on.
And it's to create a position, are you going to call it a position paper or a position statement on the sustainability plan?
It's the Senate's response to the sustainability.
Yes.
So I hear a motion that we will have an ad hoc committee meet on the 20th, take the input from all of the senators, create a document, send it out by that Friday, and then we will have an electronic vote up or down on that response. Do I hear a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of said motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Aye. The ayes have it. We'll do that. Now, who wants to play along? So who's going to be on the ad hoc committee? So John, you would like to be? I'd like to get at least 3 people, maybe 4. Pressure?
I'm working on a pretty serious response from my program. I'm afraid it would continually get tangled in my thinking. Carol?
I understand.
I could meet on the 20th. I won't be here for the vote on the 27th.
I'll stick it out there electronically. Leave it open for a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So I've got 2. I want more. Sarah?
I can go.
You can do it, Barb? And you're okay, Sarah? So that worked. Does it work for everybody if we have an ad hoc committee of these 4 people in a row? That's the problem, but you get in a row. Okay, thank you.
President, will you be participating? Will you be participating with the ad hoc committee?
I don't know. Do y'all need me to?
Is it your birthday?
Not at the ad hoc committee day. So we have one more thing to do. I've got 10 more minutes, unless there's any other discussion about the ad hoc.
Please proceed.
Okay. So we're going to have an institutional board with conditions, as you are all quite aware. There should be there will be a faculty position on said board. There is a question as to whether or not the faculty position will vote or not. That's up to the governor, although the President Davies will forward that he thinks that that position should have voting rights, but that, as I said, is something that the governor will decide. It's going to be a 2-year term. The term will start July 1st of 2015 and run through 2017. And it is expected that there will actually be a need for the person who will serve on this term to be identified before the July 1st, because there will be a need to start drafting aspects of the board beforehand. So it's a probability, or well, a possibility with a high probability that whoever is the faculty member for the board will probably start to work by the end of December or the early part of January on this. So one of the things we need to do, and obviously we're not going to do it now, but this is kind of to start thinking about how that process may work. We need to create a nomination process for the individual that is forwarded to the governor. It's probably a good idea to forward 2 names so that there is some sense of choice, although it's in the governor's hands as to, and I'm going to use the pronoun he because everybody who's going to be running for it, I understand, is male at this point. Maybe not true, but the governor will decide how many names he wants forward. But it might be a way for us to think about processes that we at least try to do 2 people. Maybe we'll do something that if we have 2 and the governor wants 1, we then have an election or vote within the committee somehow. But we need to start thinking about that language. So I was kind of hoping that these 4 people get off of it because they're no longer on an ad hoc committee, or they're on their own ad hoc committee. But we probably need somebody willing to sit down and draft some language about how it is that we might go about considering it. We might model that language on the IFS language that's in the Constitution. However, the IFS voting happens before December, and we might want to just vote on it at the same time we're voting everything else. So each college and area is asked to create their committees in May. So that's when we vote on committee membership. So that we might want to think about that there too. So thoughts, questions, ideas? Anybody looking forward to writing some constitutional language?
Just process.
Mm-hmm.
I got most of what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're describing the process.
Mm-hmm.
You see the Senate as the appropriate group to do that. And the election for the board member will come in a general election amongst the faculty then? Is that what you were saying?
Well, the question is, how do we get the nominations? And then whoever is nominated is forwarded by the Senate to the governor, and then the governor actually puts the person on the board. So the question then is, how are those nominations garnered and the timing of that?
And my question, I probably didn't state it very well, is if we have several nominees, how do we cull it down to 2? Is that a vote of the Senate? Is it a vote of the faculty in general? I didn't understand that.
And that's part of the question about process, and part of where we should really have a conversation about this in June. So one possibility could be to have the colleges, because thinking of the idea of 2 nominees, that each of the colleges work to create a nomination that they forward to the Senate, as they do, or people are supposed to forward to the Senate for IFS. So that's a possibility.
If we have to create the process. An us and them, a cast, a Kobe nomination, that would be great.
Yeah. So that's that. But I need to get the conversation started, because I'm assuming that we will be asked to provide the nomination names by September.
We being the faculty senate.
We being the faculty senate. And so we have June, and then nothing until we come back in September. So we need to start thinking about how we might want to try to get this done.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Okay? So, other aspects of discussion about it? Thoughts? Questions? So, okay. So I'll put that on June's agenda as well to get finalized in terms of kind of how we want to do it. So look at the Constitution, look at what happens with IFS, think about, if there's better ways to do it.
And you
I don't
mentioned,
know.
I'm sorry, I keep talking. You mentioned a committee that would be looking at that?
I was kind of hoping that we could get somebody to ad hoc to write it up and kind of present some options, like FDFC had presented some options.
That's what I thought you were doing.
I would like to do that, but it's 5 till. Everybody's got that look about them. It seems like they can't wait to go to the reception that's following here with Melody Rose and Jay Kenton from 5:15 to 6:30. So do you want to? Is anybody willing to create ad hoc? See? Just not have, I think everybody's shell-shocked and pretty much dead.
Maybe we should just say, let's take the IFS procedure as a model and work
Adapt it.
together to craft something.
We could do that. So take a look at the IFS model and see if that's reasonable. The individual would serve from July 1st of this for 2 years. So it's going to go July 1st of 15 to 17, and then July 1st, 17 to 19, and so on. So, any other good?
Well, do we know anything about the board position itself? Is it a paid position?
It's not a paid position.
Do we have any idea how much time it involves?
I'm assuming it'll be about time.
Too much.
I presume, since it's a local board, it won't be traveling to the west side.
Nope, it's going to be here, so you won't have a travel expense. I'm not quite sure what you would get out of it.
No, I'm not looking for money. I'm wondering how you get people to serve on it. I'm wondering how you get people to serve on it if you don't provide them a stipend. That's
Prestige.
Yeah, yes. You are on the board. So.
Something to put on your Vita so that on July 2nd, you've got a better chance of getting another job.
There you go.
But that isn't how the state board has worked, is it?
In what sense?
Well, certainly the chair of the state board receives a large salary.
Yes.
And members of the board probably have some sort of mechanism by which...
I know they're going to have travel expenses.
Yeah.
Do you know anything, Shonda, about actual expenses? I haven't heard that there was going to be a stipend for members of the board. But this, I do not know.
Donuts, maybe release.
Donuts.
Yeah,
All
maybe,
the donuts
maybe
you
it'll
can
be release time. That's a good
No, we're
point.
getting away from release time. We can't do release.
So, and before this goes way downhill, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting then. Adjourn. That's what we are now adjourned. Okay.